Today we'll be working on lesson 4.5, graphing radical functions and inequalities. There is a video for the first part. Now we have to continue, so let's move on. Now, what trends or rules can you determine based on these graphs? So remember, the A will always tell you if it's greater than 1, then, like for example a 2, then there will be a vertical stretch. Now, if A is a number less than 1, then you know that there's a vertical shrink. Now, if A is negative, then you know that there's going to be a reflection over the x-axis. Remember that. This is from before. So let's continue. H, the number with the x. Remember what happens if it's, for example, if I give you something like x minus 2, so you know it's going to go right. Or for example, square root of x plus 2, it means that it's going to go left. So h basically tells you whether it's going to go right or left. The k usually is the number outside the radical, so plus 1, it means it's going to go up. If you have a minus 2 outside the radical, it means it's going to go down. So k tells you whether it's going to go up or down. Now, let's move on to the first question. Which of the above variables controls the starting point of the domain? Now, every time, I'm going to write over here, so I'm going to make a box. Every time you draw a radical function, there will always be a starting or end point. We decided to call it an end point, hk. Now the domain depends on the h, and the range will depend on the k. Now let's go back to review with you. For example, if you look at number 5, there's no number next to the x, so then the h would be 0. Since there's a number 4, so the k would be 4. So that would be the starting of the domain, and that would be the starting of the range. So h is for domain and k is for range. We'll talk more about this with other examples. Now, this will be a good time for you to pause the video and try to do this question on your own. Now, remember, you have to decide whether it's shifted, reflected, and what's happening. Is it a vertical shrink or vertical stretch? So I hope you tried on your own. Now let's do this together. Now, is it going to be shifted? Now, there's nothing next to the x. There's a negative 2, so it's going to go down by 2. There's no negative with the 2, so there's no reflection. And effect of a, since it's 2, it's greater than 1, so there will be a vertical stretch by a factor of 2. Now let's move on to the second part. Since we have a negative, so yes, there is a reflection across the x-axis. Since we have a half and it is less than 1, so there's a vertical shrink. Now, negative 2 with the radical, it means it's going to go right 2, and plus 2 on the outside means it's going to go up 2. Does it ring a bell? Do you remember them from before? Now let's move on to 3 and 4. You are given the transformation, but you're supposed to write the function. So there is a reflection and there's a stretch by 3, so then you have a negative 3 on the outside. Radical. It's not going right or left, it's only going to go down. So x is alone under the radical, and it's down by 5, so minus 5 outside the radical. Now let's move on to the last one. There's no reflection, so it's not negative, it's positive. There's a vertical shrink by half, so there's a half, and then the radical x. Now it's going to go right 2, so under the radical you put minus 2. Down 4, so minus 4 on the outside of the radical. Now let's move on to the next page. Let's move on to the next page. Let me try to delete. Let's open a new page. This is 4 or 5 notes. Let me get it from here. So this is the 4 or 5 notes. So let's move on to the back page. Now here in number 6 and 7, you are supposed to be graphing them. So before you start graphing like we did 1 through 5, I want to talk about the endpoint a little bit more. Endpoint. The endpoint, you can know it from the calculator, you can just know it from here. Now there's an 8 with the x, so then the endpoint will start with a -8, and then there's a k, which is a -2 on the outside, so it's a -2. So that would be the endpoint. It's going to be the opposite of whatever is inside the x and the number that is on the outside. That is your endpoint, -8, -2, and it will show on your calculator. So let's graph it on our calculator and get the points. So it's going to be negative square root of x plus 8. Now most of you told me that this was easy, and now you go over and then you put -2. Then you graph it to give you an idea of how it's going to be. As you can see, since it's a negative, it's not going to be a shooting star, it's going to be upside down, a reflection of a shooting star. So go to second graph and then try to start with a number that makes sense, like not the error one. Okay, so this is it, -8, -2, and as you can see, your endpoint, you figure it out from the equation to be -8, -2. So let's grab all the points that make sense. So -8, -2, I don't have space to write it, but you're supposed to create a table. So this is -8, -2, then we have -7, -3. So that would be the second point. Now move on to get more points, get up to 4 points. So -4, -4 would be another one. And then I don't want you to think it's a line. So some of you might just take 3 points and connect it like a line, but it's not. So that's why it's good to get more points. So 1, -5 would be another one. So as you can see, it's not a line, it's like curved, and it's gonna go on forever. So endpoint, always remember to write the number on it, so it would help you with your domain and range. So always the endpoint is very important. -8, -2. You can tell it. You can tell from the calculator it's the first point that makes sense after the error, or you can tell it from your equation. You can do both ways. Now let's continue. What is the domain? Domain is always from this x of the endpoint, so from -8, and as you can see, it's going all the way to the right, so it's going to be all the way to plus infinity. Now the range is going to be from the y of your endpoint, so from -2, let me write -2, and since it's going to go down, so it's going to be up to -infinity. If it's a shooting star, it means it's going to go to plus infinity. Now this is the parent function for you to be able to compare them. So -2 to -infinity then, and remember we don't write it this way, so you have to switch it to be -infinity to -2. Now let's move on to the next question. They're asking find f of 17. If they say f of 17, it means x is 17, find y. So it means you go to the table and you try to find when is x 17. So go all the way to get x 17 until you get to 17. There you go. When x is 17, y is -7. So f of 17 then is equal to -7. It means when x is 17, y is -7. Now let's move on. If they say f of x equals to -5, it means they gave you the y to be -5 and you're supposed to find the x. So go to y equals -5, try to find y equals -5. There you go, y is equal to -5, x is equal to 1, so x then is equal to 1. That would be it. Now that's number 6. I want you to try to do number 7 on your own, and then we'll discuss it together in class. It's the same concept as number 6. It will show me that whether you understand or not. Now let's move on to number 8. Now as you can see, 8 is an inequality. Let me make this smaller so you can see the difference between 6 and 8. Now 6 is an equation, so you graph it on the calculator, find the points and graph it. It would look like this. Number 8, as you can see, there's an inequality sign. So this is an inequality. It means you have to be shading either above or below, remember? So let's try again. So then you have to try to do 9 and 7 on your own. So let's do 8 together. So the first thing every time they give you an inequality is that to graph on your calculator whatever they gave you. So first of all, you graph it. Square root of x plus 2, so go to y equals and graph square root of x plus 2 and over plus 5. Then go to second graph and grab the points. That makes sense. Start always with the end point, which is negative 2, 5. Negative 2, 5. So let's graph it. Negative 2, 5. This is my first point. Then we have negative 1, 6. As you can see, it looks like a shooting star. Then let's move on. Let me grab 2 more points. We have 2, 7 and 7, 8. So 2, 7 and 7, 8. That's my shooting star. Now, did I do anything wrong? Now let's see. This is how you graph it. Now after, excuse me. So after you graph it, let's look at the inequality. So first step is you graph your equation. Then let's look at the second step. We have an inequality and it's greater. It means you have to shade above, and it's not greater or equal, so you have to have a shaded line. So let me grab the eraser. I'm gonna make it look, it's not erasing. So I'm gonna draw above it in black then. So it should be a shaded line. Now you have to shade above. Now, are you gonna be shading above all above? Like where do you draw the line? So this is the end point, right? So you draw a vertical line at your endpoint. So this is like your limit. So when you go ahead and shade above, you do not shade above this line, like beyond this line. So when you shade above, you need to know where to shade above. Do you shade above everywhere? So whatever your endpoint, this is the most important point, you draw a vertical line and you go ahead and shade above that. Now to show you how it looks like, if you go to y equals, now you can go back and you know you need to shade above, so keep pressing enter. And oh, there you go. Oof, I missed it, so I have to go all over again. So slowly, there you go. This is above. So I'm gonna graph it, and as you can see, it looks just like yours, and there is like the limit. So the limit is a vertical line across the endpoint, and if you can see, it looks just like your graph. Okay. Now try to do number 9 on your own. Remember, if it's smaller or equal, let me move it. It means you have to shade below, and it has to be a solid line. Now if you want to see below, after you do that, you can go back and you press enter. This is below, and if you graph it, let me show you. So it means it has to be, you have to be shading below. It's like a rainfall, as you can see. So you draw a vertical line across the endpoint. So this is like for number 9. Now let's move on. Let's continue. Now there's a continuation to number 8. Now they're asking, are these points solution to the inequality? So what you can do is you can graph it, like 0, 0 is over here. As you can see, it's not part of the shaded region, so no, it's not a solution of the inequality. 3, 8, where's 3, 8? So 3, 8, it's going to be somewhere over here. So yes, it is part of the shaded region. 2, 7, 2, 7. 2, 7, as you can see, it's a point on the graph. Now since it's shaded, then any point on the graph is not included, so no, it's not included. Now don't forget to do number 9 with it. So this is going to be your homework, number 7 and 9. Now let's continue. Which of the following ordered pairs are solutions of the following inequality? Now what you can do is that you can graph it on the calculator, and I don't know where the calculator went. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, there you go. So go to y equals, graph it. Now since it's gonna be lower, so I'm gonna keep it. So negative 2 square root of x plus 4 close parentheses plus 3. Oh, you have to move over. Plus 3. Graph it. Okay, now let's see. Now then let's go back to y equals. Let me go back to this, and it's gonna be lower, so I'm gonna keep on pressing until it shows me the lower. There you go. So you can graph it, and as you can see, it will show you. Now what you can do, they want negative 5, 1. So go to negative 5, 1. Where would negative 5, 1 be? There you go. As you can see, it's going to be somewhere